So let's just start off with some personal history kind of things. Like where you're from, how old you are.
Alrighty, I'm 26. I'm about to be 27.
Beth White.
Wake.
Wake.
W-E-I-C-K.
W-E-I-C-K.
Rhymes with hike and bike.
Beth White, hike, bike. Alright, so Beth White,
26. I grew up in Kittnersville, Pennsylvania.
Kittnersville.
K-I-N-T-N, Ersville. Which is between Schnecksville and Schwanksville.
Oh my gosh.
But it was pretty rural back then. My dad's a farrier. My mom did food. I grew up with that sort of sensibility, I suppose. My parents were always very vociferous about learning to do things with your hands, and freedom was in knowing how to provide for yourself. They've definitely been a huge influence and inspiration and whatnot in my life.
Okay. So, what can you tell me about your involvement with, I guess, well, actually, first, I want to know about any college experience you may have had.
I went to Colgate University. I did nothing agricultural there. I have a double degree in Latin American Studies and Social Geography, which is great. I traveled a bunch, had a slew of opportunities offered to me, learned lots of different things, but ultimately that was also not a world I wanted to be a part of. To convince me that action was of the utmost importance, and that I wanted to make sure I was always doing something. And I think what I learned through those college years was a distaste for always having to say no to things, and rather wanted to create a situation where my life was about saying yes to something new, something that I could believe in and follow, and share with others. That was definitely the most beneficial thing I got out of college, I think. By the time I left that, I knew I wanted to get back to the land, agriculture, farming, food, that sort of thing.
Cool.
Connections.
So, yeah, what can you tell me then about your involvement with, well, permaculture specifically, because that's kind of what I'm looking into, but if, it stems into acres and how you got involved here and all that.
Yeah, I actually was totally unfamiliar with the concept of permaculture until I got here. I came here specifically just because I had an interest in agriculture. I had an interest in this area. I had been living in this area for a while, and I wanted to stay. And I wanted to educate and talk to people. And I didn't want to just farm a straight road. I didn't want to do black plastic. I didn't want to be in a food system that mirrored all the other industrial systems out there. I wanted to create something different, and that was an opportunity that the Acres, was offering. And even once I was here, my understanding of permaculture was definitely a slow evolution. Very rapidly I learned the interconnections of the system around me and could articulate, how the gardens, how the animals, how the birds, the bees, the soil, the air, how that all worked together. But if someone asked me for a definition of permaculture, I was basically speechless. It definitely took a while to sort of wrap my head around what it was that was, not to define the system with the system itself, but what it was that was happening here. And slowly began to see that it was this idea of holistic design, of stacked functions, of designing and intending for something sustainable, and looking for the way to maximize the use of different resources and create solutions where there had been problems.
So would you say it was kind of intuitive for you?
It is. I will joke often that it's common sense, and it's easier to teach people the lessons of permaculture than it is to teach common sense. I don't like to say that comment all the time, because it seems like it can easily be turned into a way to denigrate the concept of permaculture, and that's certainly not my goal. But it is essentially trying to teach a way of seeing connections and seeing relationships, seeing the multiplicities of a given situation, and I enjoy that.
So, how did you start out your time at D Acres, and when did you come here?
Yeah, I first came in April 2008. I was just an intern.
Just an intern.
Just an intern. I was an intern. And, I very naively thought I could learn a lot in a couple months. I grew up on land down home. I had intentions of going down there and working the land, connecting it to the schools, doing some sort of education work down there. And I wanted to just have a taste of a different region by working up here. So I was here a couple months, I had another job to get back to, I left for that. Had another opportunity to come back for a few months and realized, the acres, there's something special here, I want to get back to that. Did that once again, had to leave for another job. It wasn't until August of 2009 that I had various commitments checked off and completed and came back here, and I had a growing sense that I didn't want to leave this area. And various things started falling into place. I didn't, even at that time, I was not I had no intention of being staff, I had no intention of being here for multiple years, but things fell into place, and very quickly I sort of gained a spot. Things kept working out, and next thing you know, there's always something more to do, so I was doing it, and here I am.
So your kind of original plan was to kind of go back home to where your parents are? Yeah. Are they still in Pennsylvania?
No, actually, they have now just moved out here. So another couple miles away, and sort of reshaped our own family structure to be in this area.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Yeah. But, so, just going back to childhood a little bit, because I realized that I'm curious about that. You said your dad was a farrier. Yeah. Did you guys have, land that you...
We did. It was only 10 acres, but we grew most of our food there. We'd buy bread and butter and eggs. We got eggs from the local lady, milk, that sort of thing. But we grew a lot of our food there. And we had sheep. We raised our own meat. We had sheep. We had chickens and turkeys. We did egg birds for a little while when I was young. We had goats for a while. A little bit of everything. Nothing on a huge scale, but enough to sort of learn things. We did a lot of hunting as well. We lived on our property. It was definitely formative.
Yeah, I'd say. Definitely. So, what to you are some of the most valuable parts of being, or of living on the acres and living the way that you live here?
Yeah, a couple of different responses that go in very different directions, but we're tied to, I would say that we're tied to the seasons, or we're tied to each other, and we're shaped by the work. And for me, the reality of living in a seasonal pattern is very important. Everything we're doing is shaped by the weather, by the climate, by the passing of the months. The food changes according to that cycle, the animals and their behavior changes, our behavior changes. There's something very real about that. And that creates a sense of purpose and a sense of place that I think can be found nowhere else. Or can be found elsewhere, but not without a connection, a rooted connection to the land. And so I think that's a very valuable piece of what's going on. I think the shared aspect of the work here, that it's not just an individual, but rather it's a group performing functions together, is both inspiring and rewarding and encouraging. I think often I see that one person plus a second person is more than those two people separately. I think the energy just builds on itself. There's a lot of momentum, a lot of possibility. I think what happens is this model is created of something different, of new possibilities. I think that's beneficial to us as far as keeping our own energy going, and it's also very beneficial to the community around us, the immediate community and the larger sort of virtual community that experiences what goes on. I think the other valuable piece here is that because of the way we've set the acres up, or the way the acres has been set up, and the way in which we participate in it, it allows for a lifestyle that is fairly distinct from, the quote, real world, or what's beyond the acres. In that, if our expenses are very minimal. We make very little money, but there's very little we can provide for our own immediate needs. Unless an individual comes to the acres with pre-existing loans or debts or whatnot, it's very possible to live very, very simply. My work provides my food. The land provides my shelter. It's a lifestyle that really reflects reality, and that is less involved in the larger structures of economics and capitalism and consumption. All those things still play a part. We're very much tied into those systems, but it's not as present on a day-to-day reality. And I think it allows for much more creative way of looking at the world and of thinking about problems and of seeing each other.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that's a current that runs throughout everything we do.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a good answer.
I forget what the initial question was.
It was about what's valuable to you about your lifestyle here.
Okay, one more thing?
Yeah, definitely.
The ability
of course
to,
you can.
It's the public presence. The fact that I think farming it's essential. Food production is essential, but I think it's very easy to do that sort of on the quote back 40 and not talk to anybody and just have it be a life. And I think both the challenge of this place and the beauty of this place is the connection to the community and connection to a public face. That we are here to try to share, to learn from others, to teach others, to educate with people. There's such a present give and take, and it's very people based and community based. I think that just gives another live sort of flame to what's going on. Just keeps things fresh, and it is about that ripple effect.
So you like that?
I like that.
Feel like you're affecting people positively.
Yes.
So what do you think are some of the most challenging changes that a person would have to make from, let's call it a conventional lifestyle, to a kind of lifestyle that is promoted at the Acres?
Yeah, wow, there's a lot.
Yeah.
I think it really depends where people are coming from, too.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
There's a basic just level of work and discipline that is not common in the rest of the world. Or in sort of the modern middle class sort of world, Western world. It's dirty, it's buggy, it's sweaty, your back hurts, your knee hurts, your arms creak, like your bones crack. I mean, there's just a physical reality to the day-to-day that is challenging and definitely new for most folks that come here.
Myself included.
So there's definitely that. I think the mental piece of it, though, is probably the more challenging ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the reality of communication and a reality of sort of shared, I'm going to say shared independence, which seems like contradictory terms, but that's, maybe I'll find a better word as I talk. But to go back to the first one, communication, I think we have been very successful here at times, and that's due to our ability to communicate through situations, through projects, through developments. But that takes a very clear understanding of each individual for themselves, and then ability to articulate and to hear and to listen and to share. And I think often the need to communicate through every detail that comes up is very challenging for individuals. Even more so, it's challenging to do so without involving your own ego or feeling like it's a personal discussion or a personal issue. So I think that is by far one of the hardest things to learn. The other piece is sort of understanding independence within a group, independence and dependence. Everyone here is very much their own person and free to do as they wish. However, we are living in very close proximity and working in very close proximity, and so that creates a unique situation where you see the best in someone, they see the best in you, you see the worst in someone else, and they see the worst in you, and it's sort of like living within this magnifying glass, because there is so much shared communication, as I'm saying, and shared work. That evolution to being transparent with yourself and with others is definitely a learning process.
It's kind of like more intensified relationships rather than just kind of gliding past each other.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Anything else?
That's all I got right now.
That's all I got. Feel free to say, oh wait, I remember something else. So, can you talk about any of your specific values or beliefs that you've identified that have influenced your kind of, I guess we'll call it, journey into the, I'll call it permaculture lifestyle here? You started talking about, your mom and dad being very formative in that, but are there any other kind of values and beliefs that play into it as well?
There are. I would reiterate that my parents I find them to be incredible individuals, and they have certainly shaped so much of who I have become. I think as far as sort of influences growing up, as far as influence growing up, the mountains, the White Mountains in New Hampshire up here, have definitely shaped the way I see the world. As a kid, we'd come up here every so often and camp and hike. From the time I was 5, I mean, it was a very influential sort of trip. You know, my parents just invoked the power of the mountains and the beauty of them. And once I was in college, I started spending summers working up in the White Mountains. Once I graduated, I spent some more time up there working. And just living in these remote backcountry areas where, especially above tree line, where life and death it's very clear. There's none of the trappings of the sort of valley life. Things are very stark. It's also a very fragile ecosystem and very dramatic weather. And those factors combine for a lot of profound experiences. Understanding my own humility and vulnerability, and understanding my own smallness. And so this definitely shaped how I saw the world and how I wanted to be in the world. It also just very much tied me to this region and sort of kept me. It was easy to find roots in this area. I think as far as important values. Oops.
Oh, shoot.
It's okay.
I think there's lots of different words I can put out here. I've never seemed to use quite the right one.
Feel free to search out loud.
When I was in college, I kept this little sort of sign on the back of my dorm door with the initials, or the acronym SIS, SIS. I have a sister. We're pretty close. But
Yeah.
Those 3 letters stood for simplicity, integrity, and sustainability. And somehow the two of us had coalesced our thoughts about the world into those words. And there's lots of different ways I could describe it, but those do explain some of my views of things. I think. Simplicity. It's fairly self-explanatory. Simplicity. Just there is so much excess stuff. There's so much. As far as material things, there's so much overconsumption, but as far as intellectual, mental space, and emotional stuff, there is so much distraction and chaos in the world right now, and I think it just strikes me that is the ill. That is why we are so topsy-turvy, globally. And so really trying to simplify my material possessions, but also sort of my mental processes and my and sort of sifting through my perspective on things and simplifying the strata of my ego so that I could be a little quietly and a little more calmly, a little more steadily. And I suppose that goes in hand with integrity too, but wanting to live ultimately for me, that meant living a life that reflected my ideals. I had lots of thoughts about everything from the ozone to pollution to consumption to child labor, all this stuff. I mean, we know so much, but what are we actually going to do about it? And I wanted a life that reflected my thoughts on those topics. I didn't want to just talk about them. There was enough to know that I wanted to do something. And then sustainability, is this word that gets floated around everywhere now? It's like the cool term, but the idea of the 7th generation of whatever you do now should be able to perpetuate it for 7 generations. The idea that I'm passing on this earth. I mean, this is like a blip in geologic time. I do not want my blip on the screen to really have that deeper ramification. I don't think it should. I don't think. I want to live lightly, and so that there's lots of words. They coalesce in a lifestyle that is much like this.
So you have a sister?
I have a sister.
Is she older or younger?
She's younger.
How much younger?
She's 24. She's turned 24.
So
almost 3 years apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like me and my sister.
Yeah.
That's cool. What is she up to?
She still lives in Pennsylvania, is engaged. She's a social worker, does a lot of Reiki and yoga classes. Very good-hearted individual.
That's cool. All right. Well, you've answered things really well. We went through a lot of questions really quickly. So that's awesome. I'm just trying to think.
Ask me again, you'll come with a different answer.
Just trying to think what else I can ask you. I have lots I can ask you. Let's go in here. I'm just curious about any kind of spiritual or religious upbringing you may have been given, and if that kind of influenced your choices as well, or your values.
This is interesting. I'm actually baptized Catholic. By the time I was 3, I think we had floated over to a Lutheran church. By the time I was 7 or 8, we bopped around to so many different Protestant types of various things that I see a little bit of everything. I would say, even as a young teenager, I still held on to some sort of concept of a being, or something up there is always this sort of image. Something
always
up
up
there.
Always upwards.
Always up and above. But I was fortunate, I suppose is the right word, fortunate enough to have parents that were always, even when they had very strong beliefs about religion, for instance, they were always very open about new ideas and always interested in conversation and about questioning. And more than passing on religious ideals, they passed on the concept of questioning and of thinking and returning to think again about that topic. So, of course, again, when I went to college and I was 18 and opinionated and, wanted to be anti-everything. And so, throwing God out of the picture seemed like a good way to go. Subsequently, I have certainly mellowed out in perhaps my argumentative nature for atheism. I think, I do very much ascribe to some sort of energy floating amongst us all. I don't like to think of it as a god, per se, or of a being who's influencing or watching. But I think rather collectively, we as a people, we as the earth, the components of our ecosystem, we as particles in the universe, there's certainly, there's energy between it all. And, as far as bigger picture, precise definitions, I don't have the answer, but I also don't have much interest in finding the answer. I'm not sure there is just one answer. And I'd rather just work to live so that my energy is the best it could be and can touch people as best it can.
That's good. So, do you have any interests outside of the agricultural and in terms of sports, art, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I did a variety of different sports through, as I was younger, and I'm not tied to any of those. I do I very much like physical work, which is why I like farming. I like work. But I still relish my time in the mountains. I worked up there doing search and rescues and basically being a Sherpa of sorts. And whenever I do get a chance to go up to the mountains, I love that. I love the act of hiking, the act of walking, but I also just love in that sort of environment. And at this point, too, it is a source of memory and a place to reunion with the folks that I was working with up there. So that is maybe, I would say, the most precious spot off the farm, to get up to the mountains and be engaged in those sort of, in the mountain act for a while is important to me. I like to write, and I do a lot of writing for the farm. As I have time, I pursue sort of personal works as well. It's hard to make that time, but that's something that I enjoy. And it often is attempts to tie the farm to the mountains and the mountains to the farm. I write a lot of letters, and that's my only means of communication. I don't have an email address. I have a phone here, but I don't have a personal phone or whatnot. So most of my communications with family and friends is via letter. And family is increasingly important to me. My parents live nearby. My, I don't know what I want to say, boyfriend, partner, person who means a lot to me lives nearby as well. And having time for those relationships, that is those various levels of love and connection sort of complete a life. It's not just about sweat and physics and whatever else.
Sweating poop.
Yeah.
How old are your parents?
My parents are 59 and 56.
I'm just always curious because my parents are generally older. My mom's 61.
Okay. Not terribly older.
Not terribly older. No, not bad. So, what are your hopes for, I guess, the future of D Acres and the future of the permaculture lifestyle?
Wow, which one do I take first? I think as far as D Acres, this place has had such a incredible evolution. Over 15 years, so much has happened here, and so many various folks have had their hands involved in projects. And even in those 15 years, the direction and the plan has altered a lot, and the course is perpetually finding its own route. I think my aspirations for this place are perhaps not maybe as direct or as pointed as some would like to hear, but I would hope that this, there is the basics of hoping the place continues, of working for financial sustainability and for a system of governance and organizational structure that can perpetuate itself. And working for those things are the work that would ensure that is ongoing and active at the moment. I think sort of bigger picture, it is I hope that there's can be more folks here permanently that can actually maintain the work of this place. Between the gardens and the animals and the buildings, there's work that can easily max out a small crew of people, and if that core group can be larger, it will be personally more sustainable, and therefore organizationally more sustainable. I think beyond that too, we're looking for. I'm losing my train of thought here. I think big picture, it is for participation and for community involvement and for a growing. To instigate the growth of the network around us. There is a lot going on in this region, being the Upper Valley, the Baker Valley, even just the Lakes region. There's a lot of active work sort of in the same vein of progressive, sustainable, green, holistic type work. And as those networks strengthen, to be players in that network and to help continue the ripple so it is beyond our region, but to states, to continents, to regions, to
the world.
But then there's also the here and now, there's lots to do as far as developing the land, but also developing our ability to communicate with each other and live with each other. And I think ultimately the work is not the challenge, but the being together and sharing the work.
And the permaculture lifestyle.
Yeah, what was your original question? The goals?
It was what are kind of hopes for the future?
Hopes for the future, yeah. I think the permaculture movement can only grow, and I hope that the ethos behind those teachings can be heard and can spread, and not necessarily through sort of preachy education or whatnot, but through a rather deeper understanding, and that folks can practice the ideas of interconnected design and holistic practices and sustainable projects, and that the sort of intrinsic worth of those things can ripple out. I think while there's a lot of power in the permaculture movement, there's also the fact that it is a movement, and that once a concept is elevated to the status of a movement, it also has the potential to become a fad and to burn out. And my hope is that because the ethics of permaculture are so rooted in ecosystems and in place and in an understanding of interconnections within those ecosystems, that somehow the message behind the movement can sustain itself, and that it doesn't become what so many movements have been, which has just become rote and then passes by.
Yeah. Do you have any criticisms of the permaculture design system, or any criticisms of what happens here?
I should offer the caveat that I've never actually been certified or trained or taught anything in the permaculture design courses, schools, curriculum. What I know is just by living it. And perhaps that gives me a unique perspective in that I have very much, I've immersed myself in a hands-on approach, and I have very little training in the mapping and the analysis and the designs and
books,
the verbology, the literature of it. I think, this is a difficult one. I think the flaws, I think, are magnified by individuals. The flaws are not necessarily in the concept itself, but in the way in which individuals can go about using that information or highlighting that information. I think within the permaculture world, as much as with any other previous sort of group or movement, there are perhaps it is just questions of ego, issues of ego, but it is difficult to be a leader and not to dictate to what do I want to say. There are a lot of leaders in the permaculture movement, but it can often become about the leader itself rather than the message behind the movement. And I think, not permaculture per se, but as in any movement, that is a danger. I do see D-Acres as a place where we're working to mitigate that, because there are so many folks that we are striving for this sort of horizontal style of leadership and of sort of public communication. And so I think, I by no means think the permaculture movement is suffering, but I think there's the potential to harm itself if it does not supersede the tendency for us all to want to be about our own egos.
To pervert it, if you will.
Yeah, pervert it, that's a good word.
Yeah, that's a good one. Trying to think if I have any other questions for you. Do you have any comments about, I guess, any political stances that seem to be trending in this kind of movement, as you've called it?
Political trends within the permaculture?
Yeah. And you can talk about your own if you want.
It's difficult just because permaculture is so far on one side of sort of the standard political spectrum. And
can you even talk about that within this lifestyle, or does it just not really play a role?
Those are like two concepts that I've never really put together. I mean, I put them together, but not that are actively happening in my day-to-day language. I think the goals and the challenges of the political world are on a whole different plane with a whole different set of values and judgment scales or whatnot than those working within the permaculture world. I think it does highlight very well the ultimate challenge. I mean, we can talk about people having gardens and chickens and idea of designing for sustainability, but for permaculture to really be effective, it's also got to reach sort of that higher level where politics are operating, and needs to do so without being perverted, as you said.
Corrupted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I mean, that's really the challenge. That is just a question of scale. Permaculture is very much this grassroots concept at this moment. It's really how it's operating, how it's spreading. And politics is very much this top-down global approach. And not that permaculture needs to operate in that way, but it needs to be able to address the systems, or redo the systems, or create new systems that will make the existing systems of destruction and power and all these negative overarching concepts of political hegemony and economic dominion and resource depletion and whatnot, to make those obsolete.
Are you sure you haven't read any of the permaculture books? Because you sound like you have.
I read a couple things here and there, but
here and there.
It's really I don't have time to read.
Not even like easy books, just for fun.
Easy books. The summer I'm up too late. The winter it's too cold. So there's like 2 weeks in the fall and the spring when maybe I would think about reading.
Yeah, I've always been curious where you guys live during the winter.
I live in the silo, which is attached to the
You
barn.
live there in the winter?
Yeah.
That's cold.
Yeah, there's no heat. I stuffs in the cracks, so the snow only comes in if it blows like wicked hard horizontal, but it won't come in on a normal storm.
Oh my god.
I just keep a couple blankets that I sleep on, and then I put 2 sleeping bags inside each other, and I sleep in that. When it's real cold, I've stuffed in my snow pants a couple times, but
yeah,
for the most part, I like it. I like the fresh air. I think it keeps me healthy.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
God. It's hard enough for me to get up in my house during winter and put my feet on like the hardwood floors that are there, because it's right on the basement and it's not insulated, so they're pretty cold. But not as cold as that.
Everybody accuses me of being young and stupid and stubborn, so I might just live it to the maximum.
I guess.
I can have a fire when I'm older.
People assume that they say that you're young and stupid and stubborn.
Young and stupid and stubborn and living in the cold and winter sort of maxes that out, so.
Maybe the young and stubborn, but I wouldn't say stupid. Not.
I think the other reality of that, though, is I do a lot of the logging with the oxen.
Yeah.
And I'm very aware of how much work it is to get each piece of firewood.
Oh,
I love the work, but I realize it's not, for me, it is not necessary to use it at that rate. And so, but I know as I get older, I will want that is a comfort that will be important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
might as well live without it now.
It's totally my own way of thinking about it, but I'm not going to use the fire until I need the fire.
I think that is something that I would personally struggle with a lot. Yeah. I mean, this is something I'm obviously quite interested in and care about, and I try to be quite open-minded, and I'm willing to make an effort, but I think that when it gets down to the nitty-gritty of it, it would be definitely challenging for me to make that kind of switch. And so, what would it be like for someone?
Most folks do have some fire. I do have a wood stove.
Oh, do they?
Oh, yeah.
You're just especially nitty-gritty.
No, I'm not the only one. There's a few others that like it too. That's not a requirement of the of the concept.
I mean, what do you think it would take to have people really live that kind of way, live in such a minimal way that you don't use any resources until you absolutely have to?
Well, I think ultimately people have to be comfortable with themselves. And I think there's so many distractions and sort of white noise that people are not comfortable with themselves and are never given the opportunity to push themselves or find out what limits they're operating with. I think too, sort of in the less metaphysical realm, we're owned, controlled, pushed by all sorts of media all the time, and we have such a culture of consumption at this point that the concept of holding back or of waiting for something or for even just pausing on an instantaneous want, that doesn't even cross our minds. Most of it. I say we, it's the collective sort of Western social world or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think whether it's through economic collapse or whether it's through resource depletion or political chaos, whatever it is, I think we as a people are going to have to be faced with the realities of our choices, with the reality that we cannot have whatever we want when we want it, before we're really able to. That's gonna have to hit us in the face before we can really try to understand why it is we're living in a different way.
Faced with the reality of our choices.
I think, it's really, in my mind, it's a question of scale in terms of citizenship and consumption. And most people are aware that as citizens they can operate only on a fairly local level. As far as, I can be a citizen of the Acres, I can be a citizen of Dorchester, I can be a citizen of the Penny Baker Valley, the Upper Valley region. That's really the ability, my ability to deeply connect with the people in a place.
It's pretty far still.
And that's still a very wide region. My ability to understand the struggles and the pains of people, to really feel that, is only a certain scale at which that connection can be real.
Yeah.
And yet, as consumers, one step out this door, the first purchase I want to make anywhere outside this place, I'm instantly, through my consumption habits, connected to someone halfway across the country, if not halfway across the world. And despite what I can read about pesticides in the fields of Chile or child labor in the mills of Taiwan, it's a scale that is really beyond our human capacity to feel. If you lose a finger on a sewing machine, that's very real. Knowing that there's hundreds of children losing fingers all the time, thousands of miles away, is not really a scale that can be. And so when I go to buy whatever it is I'm buying, my own wants are too close and the realities of other people too far to make a difference. And so I think really it's a question of, we need to make our citizenship and our consumptionship operating at the same level. And then that goes back to a question of local economics and local food. And back to why I like the Acres.
That's an excellent place to stop too, because that was a really good way of describing it. That's really cool. You passed, Beth. Now let's figure out how to turn this off.